everybody, welcome back to The Last Rep. I'm here with David Bay. David, what's going on this week in the world of bodybuilding?
Oh, big weekend. Had the Pittsburgh Pro and the Arnold Classic South Africa, most notably. So, obviously, a couple of big shows. No men's open bodybuilding at Pittsburgh, but had figure, men's physique, classic physique, bikini. And then we had fitness and open bodybuilding in South Africa, where your sentimental pick from last week, I'm not going to lie. I doubted it, but Johnny Jackson coming away,
My man.
not only a winner of an Arnold Classic, but he is going back to the Olympia in his final year competing. So even though I got my predictions wrong, happy to see Johnny get a win.
Well, the Johnny O. Jackson show continues, and the O is for, oh boy, how about Johnny, man, in the winner's circle and going back to the Olympia. This was his wish. This was his dream, to win an Arnold and finish his career on the Olympia stage, and he's going to get to do just that. I can't think of a better send-off for Johnny Jackson after all these years than being in Vegas to a standing ovation, which surely he'll get, and going out the way he wants to go out. So this is great, man. I was really pulling for Johnny. And I tell you what, man, might have been the best version of Johnny I've seen.
Yeah, his upper body's always big, but he looked really big. I'm going to say he was probably still a little bit sharper when he won in San Antonio, and I would like to see him get back to that for the Olympia. You know, legs weren't huge, and we could talk about that all day. But, he looked good. And, one of the things we had discussed was that the right circumstances were going to have to play out in order for him to get a win. And they did.
Yeah.
Now, from what I had seen from the live stream and reading from other people's comments and stuff like that, a lot of people thought Michael Lockett could have won based on his conditioning. But again, Michael and Johnny, Michael's got the one leg that's down a little bit. So you can't say Michael dominated Johnny in the leg department. And, in their side shots and stuff, Johnny's very impressive. So is Michael. But in their back shots, Johnny hands it to Michael pretty good in the back lat spread and the rear double bicep. And that's not taking anything away from Michael. Obviously, his conditioning. Michael's an interesting guy because we talk so much about these pros not being able to repeat their conditioning over and over. And Michael's always shredded, but is it shredded because he's that consistent with his diet and his contest prep, or is he always shredded because of whatever sort of genetic anomaly he's got going on? He's just always going to be shredded. In any regard, he shows up shredded, always gives the fans what they're looking for, and it's good to see him moving up in his placings. Second at a show like this, in front of Juan Morel,
Yep.
in front of Victor Martinez. This was a big show for Michael as well.
It was huge, and he deserves all credit. Now, for those who think that Michael could have beaten Johnny, I rest my case in the second they turn around. Michael is very weak from the back. He's very dominant from the front. He's as muscular as anybody. We all know that. That's kind of his calling card combined with his conditioning. Johnny is so dominant from the back. I mean, listen, his best shots are his back thickness.
Right.
And that's Michael's weakest spot. So even if it was close, there's your tiebreaker. So to me, it was a solid 1-2 from the pictures and video I saw. Well deserved by Johnny, and he got to be up there with the man himself, Arnold, giving that speech that everybody's dreamed about getting. And
yeah, I mean that's a huge part of it too.
Sure.
I mean it's one thing to win a show in your final year, and obviously another thing to be able to go back to the Olympia, but just to be able to be interviewed on stage and have those pictures. I mean that's the sort of stuff that lasts a lifetime. You get a picture of you with the trophy on stage with Arnold. That's the kind of stuff you blow up and you hang up in your house, and just memories that you're always going to have. So, I'm really happy for Johnny. I agree a 1,000,000%. I think if he announces at the Olympia that it's his last Olympia and the fans are made aware, I think they're going to go nuts. Standing ovation. He's been a consistent competitor for a long time. And just one of those guys who's, every expo he's at, every guest appearance he's at, he's just really good to the fans and really good to the people. And he's not a Jay Cutler, like the most popular guy in the world, but he sure is loved by the people that know him. So I'm happy for him. I mean, at the end of the day, would I have liked to have seen, this is where I kind of flip my viewpoint. At the end of the day, I would have liked to actually have seen Johnny not win, and that might sound kind of like a dick thing to say.
Hey, where are you going with this one?
Here, had everybody shown up at 100%, Johnny at 100% doesn't beat Victor at 100%. And we're getting to the point. Some of the guys were discussing this on Facebook and some of the forums, like, how many more times are we going to see this, or how long are we going to see these trends of these top guys? And Juan Morel and Victor Martinez are top guys. They might not be your top 5 at the Olympia,
Right.
but make no mistake, these guys are top contenders in the IFBB. And it seems like you're missing the mark. You're missing the mark. You're missing the mark. And as a competitor, I know. Look, it's hard to nail it on stage, especially when you're that big. But when you're a professional, it's like that's what you do. That's what you have to focus on. And when I say I would rather Johnny not have won, it's because I would like all the guys to have shown up in shape. And had Victor been in shape, he would have won, I think.
Well, Eddie, bottom line is this. At the end of the day, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference what anybody looked like the day before, the day after, or should have, would have, and could have on paper. Johnny did his homework. He showed up better than he did at the last show. He was rewarded for it. And, yeah, listen, there's some better physiques out there overall. If Victor, I'm going to skip over Juan for a minute. If Victor shows up, and again, people love to use this reference, but, well, if he just looked like he did in 2007 when he should have won the Olympia, it's like, do you actually realize how far 2007
we're 10 years removed. It's a piece away.
We're talking in dog years here. I mean, listen, 2007 was a lifetime ago, okay? Victor still has a formidable physique. From everything I've heard, and again, we weren't there, so I'm going on what I've heard from people that were there and judges and such. Victor came out, and it was his show. Like, it was like, oh, boy, Victor's back. And from what I understand, he started to fade almost immediately. Glossed over, smoothed over, whatever the connotation you want to put to it. And he fell from a projected first all the way to fourth. So that can be a timing issue. That can be a carb issue. That can be a lot of different things. Not estrogen, cortisone.
Cortisol.
Thank you. Cortisol release. I mean, listen, there's a lot of components that come into this, and Victor has not been on stage for a while. So he's got other shows, and I assume that we'll see Victor in New York. Juan, I don't know, man. I got to be honest, David. I'm a little disappointed. These are shows that Juan should be winning. He's one of the up-and-comer guys. He's got all the tools to do it, but like we just said in the last show, Juan continues to miss the mark, and he's letting other people in front of him now. And I got to believe at this point, he's probably getting a little burnt out. I don't know if he's scheduled to do New York, David, but if I was in his camp, I'd be telling him to sit out and regroup for something at the end of the year.
Yeah, there's a handful of shows coming up here in a relatively short period of time, I guess you could say, as far as the calendar goes, but a short period of time as far as the calendar and maintaining stage condition are two different things. If the shows are 3 weeks apart, that's hard to maintain that. You got a day or two where you could probably eat normal, and then it's back to the diet. But I don't think Juan wants to, and obviously I can't speak for him, but I can't imagine he wants to drag the diet out much longer than he has to, but I imagine he wants a win, or at least to be confident that he has enough points going into the Olympia. Now, you have New York coming up in a couple weeks. The weekend after New York, Toronto got moved up a week this year. It's usually the first weekend in June. Now it's the last weekend in May. So you have those shows, and then you have another show the second weekend in June, Chad Nichols' St. Louis show. So within the next handful of weeks, within the next 5 or 6 weeks or so, we have 3 shows: New York, Toronto, St. Louis. Then after that, you're talking another month before Vancouver and the Chicago, and then Vancouver, and then Tampa, and then you're talking about really dragging it out. And if you start getting into July and August, you're talking 7-8 weeks out from the Olympia. So if Juan's going to qualify, and if he's going to do it and have any time to rest his body, which I think we can all agree that he would benefit from before the Olympia, he's going to have to either win or lock down enough points where he's going to be comfortable at the New York Pro or Toronto. Now, let's say he takes second in New York or third, and then a second or third again in Toronto, which he can very well do. With what he's done already this year, he should be good on points. But Juan's a competitor just like everybody else, and I can't imagine that's how. And again, like we've talked in previous shows, I don't think there's anything wrong whatsoever with going to the Olympia on points. And if somebody can get second or third place at a show like the New York Pro and again at Toronto, there's a level of consistency there that, in my opinion, warrants you going to a show like the Mr. Olympia. But anybody that's ever gotten on that stage knows that's not how you want to get there.
Well, I'm going to go back to something you just said, though, David, and key on it. In normal circumstances, yes, Juan should be able to place in the top 3 in New York or Toronto or really any show. I'm not so sure that's the case right now because he's been going all year. He's going to be getting some downgrade and some stuff that's just not firing and not happening at this point. You're literally fighting your own physique at this point. Not a good spot to do. If Victor just dials it down a notch in New York, his own hometown, he can't beat Victor. If they show up at even close to 100% each, Victor beats him 10 times out of 10. He just has a better physique. Same thing for the rest of the guys, though. Listen, there's other guys coming up like De La Rosa and some of the other names that we haven't even seen yet. And
Akeem Williams is going to be in New York.
Akeem, listen, Akeem can beat them all with all that muscle he's got. So I'm not so sure that Juan could or should go in that show. Again, I may be leaning towards, again, just in the fictitious land of, we're running his camp. Taking him out of the lineup right now, if he was, I know it's in his backyard, but what you don't want to do is go in there, David, and open up the door and letting 3 or 4 or 5 other guys in front of you. That's not going to bode well in front of the judges. It's not going to look good for himself, and then you're going to have to shut it down anyways. So, good strategy there.
Yeah, I mean, but on the flip side of that, when you are close to contest condition, if he can just, when it wasn't like he's, the guy's not fat. It's not like you look at him and he's 6 weeks out. He's not like he's 6 weeks out or anything. And there is 2 weeks now, but do we have? Well, New York is next weekend, so he's got 2 weeks between South Africa. 2 weeks is a lot of time when you're close to contest shape, but we also have to take into consideration his travel time back home from South Africa, getting readjusted, then having essentially 10 days to tighten things up. But Juan's a New York guy, and if you talk to him, the New York Pro is, I remember interviewing him out at Bev's gym, and he said, the New York Pro for the New York guys is kind of like the Olympia. You grow up watching that show, you grow up going to it, because it's in your backyard. You grow up remembering all the champions from when it was Night of Champions to the New York Pro. And he's like, that's kind of, our Olympia. So if I had to bet money right now, I'm going to bet on Juan being there.
Well, I hope he's got a little gas left in the tank because he's going to have a much tougher lineup, I believe, in New York than he just had in South Africa. I don't think there's any question about that. Victor, as we just talked about, it's his backyard. He's won this show before. I still think he does have enough gas in the tank. He doesn't have to travel consistent, to be...
I mean, we might see Michael Lockett in New York. I don't know if Lockett's planning on doing New York. The guy doesn't have to. There's a guy who doesn't have to do anything to stay in shape. So Lockett could essentially just keep hitting shows until he gets to a point where he's comfortable with points. I think it's pretty safe to say Lockett's going to get back to the Olympia on points this year. But he's not one of these guys where it's like, oh, I'm getting burnt out. Not to say that he's not getting burnt out from really making that last push. Sure. But he stays pretty close to contest shape year-round. So we could see Lockett in New York. We could see him in Toronto. And from a business standpoint, if Lockett's collecting, second and third place paychecks every third or fourth week,
sure,
or every other week, that's as far as the business of bodybuilding goes, then, he might want to just keep going. You look at what a plane ticket in a hotel is versus a first, second, and third place check at some of these shows. He's going to be doing all right for himself.
Well, there's a lot of new names that we still haven't seen yet this year. Leonardowitz we haven't seen. He could show up at any one of these shows, and he's going to have to show up at something if he obviously wants to qualify.
Right.
We haven't seen Nathan. I ran into him a while back, and I can't remember what show. I think he was just going to get ready for Toronto, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure. There's a lot of big name guys. Yeah.
Compton we haven't seen since the beginning of the year.
I haven't seen Compton. I know last year in Tampa you had Akeem Williams and the second place guy, the big Puerto Rican guy. What's that?
The big guy.
The big Alexis Rivera Rolon. I don't know why it's based on him.
Yeah, with the muscles.
He's a guy who should be in these big show too. So there's a lot of big name guys that we haven't seen on stage that you expect to see at the Olympia. Even like De La Rosa wants to get back to the Olympia stage. If he doesn't win New York, he's going to have to be at a couple of shows. I know Kevin Jordan is getting ready for the St. Louis show. Kevin's making a push to try to get to his first Olympia. So there's a lot of big name guys that need to get on stage yet. So it's like we talked last week, the season's really starting to ramp up. You had a couple of Arnolds early where it's, some of your more elite guys. Now it's like we're going to start to see everybody else because these guys got to requalify.
Well, let me give you a name that didn't show up here, and a lot of people, it's out of sight, out of mind in bodybuilding. And I understand we can only go by the guys who are actually there competing. But Lucas Osledil, fresh off a win, was supposed to compete in this show, and I understand he had some issues getting into the country in terms of either getting. I know some of the countries require shots or that type of thing. When you're going to go into a different country, especially South Africa. Something messed up with that. He didn't get the appropriate paperwork in or whatever, and he couldn't make it out to the show. This is huge, and it's not even a topic that anybody's even mentioned yet. But this guy, I'm not so sure if he shows up in the same shape. I don't know if Johnny had enough to beat him.
No, I think if we're being realistic here, I think if Lucas, the thing is, he's a guy, he's never off.
Not
Lucas
really, no.
He's been very consistent.
Yeah.
So I think if Lucas shows up in South Africa, he's your winner. And yeah, I heard kind of the same thing. And I don't know when you're traveling. I can't remember last year if when I went to South Africa, I had to have proof of like not tetanus, but whatever shot.
Type
but
things.
sometimes it's on the country that you're going to, and sometimes it's on your country of origin.
Right.
Like the country of origin is saying, okay, if you're going there and you plan on coming back, you need to have these shots beforehand. So, Lucas wasn't able to go. He had to kind of drop out last minute. That stuff happens. Obviously something that if anybody traveling to a foreign country, you kind of got to look in ahead of time. I kind of got, I don't want to say hosed over. I put myself in a bad spot last year by not knowing what requirements all there were for going down to Brazil, and I wasn't able to go to Brazil.
You was hosed.
Yeah, I got hosed. I think it's pretty fair to say that Lucas probably would have won, but everything works out.
Right.
Like we said with Johnny, it was going to be a case of certain things had to fall in place for him to win.
And they did. So can't complain. The one guy not complaining, of course, is Johnny Jackson. I believe Johnny will be off till the Olympia. Smart play.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Going to go for the big push, man. Like I say, you know what? Go make the rounds now. Go make some money guest posing and doing everything else. And we'll see Johnny on the Olympia stage. Ibrahim Fahim ends up in fifth. Not a bad physique. And this lineup, obviously, he was able to squeak into a top 5, so he gets a few points. And our man Jeff Beckham, who we mentioned on the last show, just out of the money in 6th place. It's too bad because he could have picked up a few more points, but Jeff is in the running right now in that top 5. I think he's in the 5th spot in the Olympia qualification series. So Jeff continues to impress. He continues to pick the right shows. I
think he's from out east too, so he might be in New York as well. Not to say he's going to leapfrog up over ahead of Juan and Victor, but yeah, you never know.
Well, some new names that will be in New York. One of those was in Pittsburgh. That's where I was, David, of course, at Jim Mannion's Pittsburgh Pro. 4 IFBB classes represented there, all going to the Olympia, of course. And one of those names was Sergio Oliva Jr. Jr. was on stage posing with the big boys, absolutely loving life. He relished every moment being out there with the likes of Phil and Big Ramy and these guys. And but he is getting ready for New York. I thought Sergio looked really good. And that's a name that we got to throw into the mix in New York. They haven't seen him there. It's his pro debut. What do you think about Junior in New York?
I think, his thing has been, and I feel like broken record time, his thing has been conditioning. When he competed a couple times at a national level, well, he was very close to a pro card and just needed to be sharper. He did that for nationals, won his pro card, won the overall. He's definitely not going to be carrying quite as much muscle as like an Akeem or a Victor Martinez. Even Juan and John De La Rosa. I don't know he's that thick, but if he shows up really, really sharp, I think he can make a top 5 or 6 spot. And as we saw in South Africa, if Sergio shows up really sharp, and some of these guys are more than a little bit off, which we've seen, it's hard to say how far he can move up. And the big question mark is going to be, we haven't seen him on stage next to some of the really big guys. Obviously he held his own, winning the super heavyweights at the NPC level. Not the same, obviously, as he's going to run into in New York. I do give him a lot of credit from his showing in Pittsburgh. He looked like he had a lot of fun on stage. It was his first time guest posing, or I think he might have guest posed there once before. But it was him and Dallas, Rulli, Phil,
Big
Dexter, Ramy. So you literally had some of the biggest pros in the IFBB, most of them off season. But and Sergio had to get out on stage with those guys, and he had a blast doing it. And
I tell you this,
I hope he does well.
He was not out of place. Obviously, he was in a little better condition. The other guys are all completely off season. He's got a show obviously coming up. So, but you know what? I was looking at pure size wise. Like I say, he was not dwarfed. Well, everybody was dwarfed by Big Ramy at 340 pounds.
It was hard to tell by pictures and videos. You know, with the guest posing videos, everybody's kind of moving around. Then when they do their pose down, one thing that we've talked about, the infamous who's on the line, who's ahead of the line, who's in front of the line. And when they're all kind of guest posing and running around stage, kind of cutting in front of each other, it's hard to get a real good idea of, you know, who's big and who's not, and who's, you know, angling out their people.
I was backstage with the guys, so I was right there standing with them as they were all lined up. So I saw them all next to each other, and he compares very favorably. For those who don't know, Sergio's a lot bigger than you think he is. He is not a short nor a small guy. He's got a lot of size. He's got that same round muscle his father had. Very reminiscent in certain poses, especially the victory pose, which his father pretty much coined. Right. I think he's got a little bit of fire under his ass going into this show, which is good. That's what he needs. But it was almost amusing to see some of these guys. You know, Dallas comes out, and you know he's huge. He's off. You know, he's completely off season now after his shows. Yeah. You know, we announced him. Well, Gary Udit was up on the microphone. I was kind of feeding him some info from back there. He was stepping on the scale at about 320 pounds. Now, instantly, of course, the crowd goes crazy. He comes out, does his thing. The next, just when you think you saw the biggest of the big, here's Big Ramy at 345 pounds. He comes out, and he is just, you know, it just looked like somebody hit him with a giant hammer, and he's so wide. I can't even describe to you. Literally one of the widest guys I've ever seen. But it looks like, but his abs were in, which is interesting on a guy who's 340 pounds to have any abs. But they're good. Yeah. Stomach was small. You know, you can tell he had very specific attention to keeping his stomach in. Unfortunately, we didn't see that from all the guys, as we saw a few pics and video, as you know. Some of these angles not the most flattering, but look at guys, you got to be more cognizant, even at a guest posing, because you know somebody's going to snap that picture. So I mean, everybody needs to pay more attention to keeping the waistline in.
Yeah, I mean, there's discussion about, you know, some of the people saw the videos and pictures of Dallas, and you know, in his defense, yeah, you're getting up on stage, you're not at a competition, you're not concentrating on that, you know, you're running back and forth trying to hit poses for this side of the stage, that side of the stage. But I think it would benefit these guys if anytime they're hitting a pose, just second nature, it was, okay, I'm hitting this pose, like I said, just becomes second nature, that everything stays tight.
Right.
You know, obviously that becomes more difficult when you're winded. Anybody who's tried to do any extensive amount of posing when you're off season, that gets tiring. Even for somebody who does, you know, some off season cardio. When you're hitting all those poses, the more tired you get, the heavier you're breathing, the more exhausted you are, the more likely you are to kind of let your stomach hang out. I think it's something that, you know, I'd rather just not see the pictures and videos of it from a photography and a videography standpoint. But on the flip side, to agree with you, yeah, the guys just have to be more conscious of the fact that they are posing. It's not 1995 where it's just the photographers in the front row with the cameras. You got people with camera phones on the side of the stage. You got people with camera phones backstage. And the cameras people are using now to take pictures with their cell phones are every bit as good as some of these old cameras that guys were using in the 90s. So you have to be conscious of that. When it comes time to get on stage, obviously that's when it really counts. But you know, even off season and stuff, it's just good for your overall image to try to make sure that, you know, from pose to pose, transition, whatever, that you're keeping things tight.
Well, I don't want to spend too much time on these guys on the stage, because honestly, it was just a basic, you know, melee. They all came out. The crowd loved it.
I would like to say that I have never. It really never ceases to amaze me. Every time, I mean, like, look, Ramy's huge. Dallas is huge. Dallas is 8 feet wide. Yeah. Ramy is probably he's just ridiculously huge. But there is just a freak factor with Rulli Winkler that I don't know that I've ever seen with anybody else. Yeah. You know, and at last year's Olympia, when he walked out, even more so than Ramy to me. It was just was he the most aesthetic? No, his waist doesn't taper the same way as Ramy's does. He's got some weaknesses that Ramy doesn't have. But just from like a holy shit, like what is that standpoint? Ruli is like he's one of my favorites. He's one of the guys where I still get really excited about Ruli's coming on stage. You know, I go all mirror of bodybuilding, like,
he didn't disappoint here. He's a complete freak. The audience loved him, of course.
The audience loves him, and he's a fun guy too.
Sure.
That's the thing about Ruli is like, I'm not going to name names, but everybody's been to guest posings over the years where the guys come out and they kind of just go through their thing and they're like, wow, this guy does not want to be here,
right?
You know. And every time you see Ruli guest pose, he looks like he's having a blast, and the crowd really feels that, you know, and it just makes the whole experience for everybody that much more fun. And I think the guy's a performer, and like I said, from a size standpoint, from a coming on stage and having fun standpoint, I just can't get enough of Ruli. I think that guy's awesome.
Well, most of the fun was I got to do interviews with all the guys. I was doing a little bit of putting a little work in there for the Prez for NBC News Online.
So I did see that, yeah.
Yep. So if anybody wants to see the full videos, they are at nbcnewsonline.com. Of course, everybody knows that. We're going to move to our lightning round, David.
Did you get anybody to talk any trash?
Oh, well, kind of. Here we go, right? The lightning round. We just made that up.
All right.
So I talked to Phil. Phil, I'm gonna bullet point here, and then obviously I want to get your take. Talk to Phil. Like I say, people can see the full video there. Phil is fired up. Phil is, I don't want to say pissed off, but he's taking this on like he's almost going into this thing like he's not the champ. He doesn't want to just beat everybody. He actually wants to destroy everybody. He wants to leave people so far back in his wake that there was no question. Like that's his mindset right now. And he was really zeroing in on Sean Roden. And that was now, and I know exactly what that was from. Sean Roden recently made some comments that he did something to the effect of he didn't really care what the judges said, that he knows he beat Phil.
He won. Yeah.
Now, Phil basically laughs at that and says, look at this guy. By the way, he completely shaded him out because Sean Roden wasn't there, which Phil made note of.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on this one, though.
Jump on?
Because I'm pretty sure Sean was with his daughter down in Jamaica. So not to jump back at Phil, but guy.
Bring her with you.
You can't, no. That's one. I'm putting my foot down.
They all got, listen, Ramy's got two kids.
He was down in Jamaica with his daughter. You can't be like, oh, he's dodging me. When he's like, that's like if a show was on Mother's Day and somebody didn't show up. He's dodging me. No, he's having a cookout with his mom. I'm 99% sure Roden was in Jamaica with his daughter, so he gets a pass. If not, then it's a fair thing.
Phil was there talking, shooting some fire and brimstone out. But let me tell you, he is on a mission. His mission not only is to obviously tie the great Arnold Schwarzenegger's record this year, but like I said, he's going in fired up and both guns a-blazing, man. He wants to absolutely crush people, as if winning isn't really enough. But that's his mindset right now. Now, interestingly, Dexter, who I also talked to, Dexter's very confident in his abilities. And I asked him point blank, is there any added incentive for you, so to say, to be the guy to take Phil out before he can tie that record? And he didn't really seem to care about that too much. He says, basically, I just want to beat him to beat him. And he says, I'm basically the only one with the tools that can beat this guy.
From the pictures that I saw, Phil is, and I've been looking at these Pittsburgh Pro guest posing pictures since Phil turned pro. Mm-hmm. And he is by far the biggest that I've seen him and the leanest at this point that I've seen him.
True.
So as far as, his obliques might be a hair wider, but that's going to come with the added size. His waist isn't, I'm not going to sit here and say his waist is as tight as it was in 2011. But Phil, to me, looks kind of like the nastiest he's looked in a while. And when you get, like we've discussed this before, when you get somebody who hates to lose, and they have people questioning him a couple years in a row, sometimes that lights a kind of fire under somebody where they just really take things to the next level. And Phil looked big, but Phil's going to have to be, in order for him to do what he wants to do, and that's dominate, he is going to have to be at his all-time best from a conditioning and a fullness standpoint. Obviously, you can't necessarily 100% compare his physiques from 2011 or 2013 to 6 and 4 years later in 2017. But from coming in full on Friday night, I think Phil's going to have to not just keep relying on coming on Saturday night at his best. He's going to have to be both nights. He wants to walk out like he did in 2013 over. Ramy's getting better. Ruli's getting better. Roden is staying consistent. Dexter might even be getting better. It was close between him and Dexter.
Well,
and it's like Phil is going to have to be 100%, not 95, not 97, not 98.2. He's going to have to be 100% on if he wants to dominate in the fashion that he wants to dominate. That being said, if ever there was a year where he looked like he was on target to do that, it's right now.
Well, let me ask you this now. I talked to Dexter. He says that he's at his best conditioning for this weight that he's ever been. I don't dispute that. Saw him in person, saw the pics. I'll go with him on that. He also points out he's the only other Mr. Olympia on stage, and he's got the most complete physique in order to be able to take Phil out. I've had a long-standing premise that Big Ramy, if there's anybody that's got the tools to take out Phil, and I've said this going years back now, that it's either Big Ramy or Cedric. Now, Cedric wasn't there. I'm going to leave him out of this conversation. Who do you think has the best chance of taking Phil out, if there is a chance, between Big Ramy and Dexter Jackson?
I got to say Ramy. Ramy, I keep saying Ramy. I got to say him. And when I think about it, I think pose for pose. I think Dexter's a more aesthetic bodybuilder than Phil, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that. Maybe not Phil 2011, but fast forward to 2017, Dexter's more aesthetic than Phil. But if we look historically and we go by the whole, if you want to beat the champ, you got to knock him out type thing, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's the case. I think Ramy's probably got the best chance, and I say that from a pose for pose standpoint, and it's not like I didn't do that before, but working with Peter really hammered in, hey, when it gets close between two guys and you can't decide, he's like, you literally have to start writing down pose for pose, and he's like, sometimes you even have to start breaking down each individual pose to try to figure out how you're going to get pose for pose. And when I go pose for pose with these bodybuilders, I think Ramy has the best chance of beating him. Front double bicep with Ramy's quads, the size of his arms, his waist, I think he hangs with Phil. Front lat spread with his width, again with his quads, he hangs with Phil. Side chest and side tricep, hangs with Phil. Phil, where he usually gets everybody, is back double bicep. Ramy's back double bicep isn't weak. His back lat spread obviously is huge. His most muscular, for as big as he is, his most muscular, Phil's, crab most muscular and his clasping most muscular, even if you want to say he has narrow clavicles and stuff, is still pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But if you want to start taking things pose for pose, I think Ramy has the best chance. Because you can argue, like if we start talking front double bicep, well, you can argue, well, Phil might be a little bigger than Dexter, but Dexter flows a little bit better. Side chest, side tricep. You could start making those arguments for every pose back and forth with Phil and Dexter, but I think you can make a better argument for Ramy if he's in shape and he's in full. We've seen him full. He was pretty peeled at the last Olympia, but dare I say he looked flat, which I think kind of boggled everybody's mind.
He was much better Saturday, though, if you remember. He was
and I think a lot of people agreed. And I said in our videos over at MD, I said I thought had they judged the show just on Saturday alone, Ramy might have been able to win. But it is a 2-day show. But if I got to pick anybody, I'm going to go with Ramy. But I'm not going to write off Sean Roden either, because I think Roden's been really close, and I think aesthetically, I think Roden is better than everybody up there. I think. What's that? No,
my young Padawan. Let me explain something to you, okay?
Dexter at his all-time best, and Dexter, look, for as good as Dexter is, and Dexter is amazing. I think he was slightly better, a handful of years ago. And when I say slightly, I mean slightly. So I don't think Dexter. It's not like Dexter gives a shit what I say.
First of all,
I think aesthetically, Roden can beat everybody. But
I think you're smoking some of that crack Ronnie was talking about years ago at the press conference.
Listen,
Let me explain to you something, my young friend, okay? First of
Adam.
all, Roden shouldn't have beaten Dexter last year. And Dexter was very upset about that. I think for good reason. I think Dexter cleanly beat him. I thought Roden was a solid third. And this is nothing personal against Roden. He's obviously one of the best bodybuilders in the world. He's a real good guy. I'm just talking pure physiques, okay? Roden's disparity between the upper body and the lower body is so noticeable that I don't agree that he can beat anybody of those guys. You know what I mean? Honestly I could have had him fourth or maybe even fifth. His back double bi is still weak. His arm still ain't big enough. He's very light in the upper chest. He gets crushed in that hands on hips pose against Phil. Of course everybody gets crushed against Phil with that pose. No, I got to be honest, man. I think, and I'm going to go on the early prediction round right now, that he actually takes a big giant step backwards this year because I don't see him beating big round. And hang on a second, if you go back to last year after in the post-Olympia shows, Roden got beat by everybody. Rami beat him, Dexter beat him, Phil beat him at the Olympia, and what was the other show he got beat? There was another show. He got beat by all those top guys in those shows.
If we're gonna apply, I got my butt kicked a few times, and I don't want to say butt kicked if you're slipping a spot or two.
Yeah, right.
Who's to say that he doesn't have the same fire to come back as the other guys? Now we got to remember Roden.
Fire is about genetics.
Roden's older, but he only turned pro in what 2012 was it?
I don't.
2011. 2010, 2012.
Keep going.
He's relatively young as far as the number of years he's been in the IFBB. So as we've seen Dexter, and it's hard to compare anybody to Dexter.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Roden can't move on up and make some improvements. I think it's the Olympia. And when we say, it's going to be close and it's a matter of who shows up that day, it's kind of like, well, no shit. It's kind of like,
that's a given.
If you take Usain Bolt out of the Olympics, and it's going to be close in the 100-meter dash. Well, yeah, it's the top 8 guys in the whole world. It's going to be close. So I think if we're making Olympia predictions already on who can beat Phil and who can do this, it's hypotheticals all day because of the fact that some guys coming off, some guys coming on. Yeah, Ramy can beat if Phil's off and if Dexter's a little off and if Roden's a little off, but we've seen Ramy off, and it's like all these. We saw Rulli last year. Rulli arguably at his best, and he was in 6th place, and he still wasn't like super shredded. So there's a question mark right there. What if Rulli came in one year just dumb shredded?
I think Rulli can beat. I think Rulli can beat some of those guys up there, including.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if we talk about like, oh my God, Rulli Winkler in 2nd or 3rd at the Olympia, it sounds kind of crazy. But
not
if
really.
you get guys who slip and he's just shredded,
Listen. I think Roden is a tremendous bodybuilder. I think he's got some choice parts, but I think the sum of those parts can't hang. He certainly doesn't beat Phil. Like I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, I know maybe he's just trying to bolster his own thing up or whatever. There is no provision on this earth that he beat Phil last year. Nobody had him beating Phil last year. Anybody of any credibility that's got an eye for bodybuilding, has been in the sport for any length of time, nobody had him beating Phil. Let's just get that out of the way.
I heard, and this is me
being
in the media. This is me being in the media pit, walking past judging tables. I heard that in the 2015 Olympia, when Kai did the hair whip, that there were judges that had Roden in 1st place after prejudging.
They should never judge again.
They should never.
All right, and as for Kai, listen, hair whip, nay, I don't care what he was doing out there. Okay,
you did not just.
Hey, I'm up on my stuff. I'm with it.
I'm hip.
I'm hip.
With it.
I'm hip to be square, like Huey Lewis. All right, that's an old one. Listen, here's the bottom line. He doesn't have the tools, bro.
So hip to be square. I think it's going to be another great Olympia, as it should be, and I think the fans really want that because I'm not going to lie. I think the Arnold all the Arnolds so far this year have been a letdown. They all have.
Yes, I mean terms of
cool seeing Cedric win. It was cool seeing Dallas and Cedric up on stage. The younger guy that's a little bit older. Cedric finally getting the Arnold, the posing, the huge structure with the great physique. But as a whole, the Arnold Classics have been down this year, and I think the fans are going to be extra fired up for the Olympia because they want to see a battle between the big names, and we're just not going to have that. I mean, even going into the New York Pro, always a good show. It's going to be really exciting. I think Akeem Williams is going to blow people away, but it's not a Ramy, Dexter Jackson, Ruley, although Akeem is, I think Akeem could establish himself with that crowd as well. There's another guy. Here's classic David Bay off in left field.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that Akeem can't establish himself as a top 10 guy.
Listen, he's got the muscle. I mean, there's no question that this guy's big enough to hang with anybody out there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're talking about all these names on who could be this and who could be that.
You put
or
Akeem,
Brandon Curry. There's another guy. I mean, Brandon Curry. If Brandon Curry makes the kind of changes he made from last year to winning the Arnold, if he makes those kind of changes from March to September and puts on more size, if he's back off in Kuwait with the anabolic chicken,
right?
There's no reason why Brandon Curry can't be a top 5, 6, 7 guy.
Top 5 would be
it's a
very unlikely.
It's Vegas, and it's going to be a crapshoot.
He can do top 10. I don't think he can do top 5. He just loses too much size against those guys because, listen, they're huge. I mean, that's the bottom, and they're all good at that level.
He's putting on some size, so that's
but you know what? He can only put on so much size onto that frame, David. I mean, let's get real here. He's a tremendous talent. Like I say, probably one of the most aesthetically gifted bodybuilders out there. A top 10, very realistic for Brandon this year. Some quick notes. Big Country will not be on the Olympia stage this year. Very unlikely. He told me
that's a guaranteed thing.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, barring anything really unusual, he just feels as though he needs to kind of go back to the drawing board and work on some weak areas and basically come back strong next year. So unlikely that we'll see Big Country. Did he say whether he was gonna do the Arnold next year again, or whether he'll do the Arnold next year, and then it's obviously a full push. He does not want to qualify on points, even if that was an option. Right. But he didn't make a big deal out of it. He's still young. He's got a lot of time, so he's got time on his hands. I don't necessarily disagree with that, although I like guys to get on that Olympia stage because
especially guys who are in the top 10. I mean, as long as somebody's not retiring because of age or a specific injury or something like that, or has some sort of major family emergency.
Hey, that's a spot open for somebody else.
The guys that are in the top 10, you want to see them back, but it's gonna look. It's way too early to be breaking the Olympia down too far. But I think we can already say it's going to be a really good one.
Well, all right. Well, David, we had another show in Pittsburgh, of course, and that was an Olympia qualifying event. Now, you and I had the friendly bet going from last week and the week before.
We did.
Two of the main guys going in men's classic bodybuilding: Chris Bumstead, your guy, and Lee Banks. That was my pick for the win. The smoke has cleared, and it was your boy Chris Bumstead in the winner's circle.
Chris Bumstead, 22. I think he's 22 or 23 now, Canadian kid. Yeah.
But with the exchange rate, he's only 20.
Yeah, and dog years. But I can't act like Nostradamus too much here. I mean, when you looked at the lineup,
Nostradamus.
He's Nostradamus. What wasn't it? Nostradamus? Is
Nostradamus, yeah.
Whatever, the guy who predicts stuff. The guy
that was Nostradamus. You are correct, sir. Yes, he looked into a bullhole soup or something like that and saw the wars in the future and all that. But
yeah, you didn't have to look. You didn't have to be a psychic or whatever to predict that Bumstead had a good shot of winning.
This kid was good.
For as much as I would like to take credit, no, he was expected to win by a lot of people, especially with his progress pictures, the way he looked last year when he won his pro card and even at his pro debut. For a 22-year-old to be making his way to the Olympia stage with the amount of momentum that he has and his overall look. I mean, that's the thing about Chris. Let's not forget that this is still a sport that's about image, it's about vanity, it's about this, it's about that. And Bumstead just has a look of a champion, of a superstar.
He looked great.
And he's really just got everything going for him, locking down a win in the biggest ever classic physique lineup that we've had in the last 2 years. A huge win for him. And I know a lot of people are excited, especially the Canadians. Now they have something to cheer for about the Olympia this year. And a good win for him. But again, I can't give myself too much credit for predicting that one because I think a lot of people had him as the winner.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he was definitely a favorite going in, but you did pick him, so I got to give credit where it's due. So I owe you lunch, although you owe me 100 lunches, so you're still paying. My man Lee Banks ended up in third, and this was tight. The top three guys, Divine Wilson in second, and even
let's go. Let's say top four, because I want to talk about the fourth place guy.
Just going to throw him in. Your boy Courage Opara. How's that for a name, David?
It's a pretty fantastic first name.
I like it.
Courage. I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty awesome.
I tell you what, these top four guys were. I mean, and let me just say this: there was 35, I think, or 36 classic bodybuilding competitors, and let me tell you, most of them look pretty damn good. So this class is definitely elevating itself and seeking its own level. And if you look back, for anybody that follows the new classes that have come in over the last 10 years. Into its second and even third year, that's about how long it takes. I remember there was growing pains with bikini, women's physique, even the men's physique when it first started. And you'll see winners of those, like a Mark Anthony type of a guy. And Mark's a fantastic competitor and a great guy to boot. All of a sudden, like, they ain't winning. And the class just kind of seeks its own level, but it skyrockets. Other than that, David, that pretty much wraps up the week. This week in bodybuilding. Yeah, a little bit of a slow weekend. And there's a handful of competitions this weekend, NPC competitions. I'm actually flying to Wichita, Kansas tomorrow to MC one of Chad Nichols' shows. Got Cody Montgomery guest posing down there, so I am excited for that. Find out from Cody what he's doing, because we haven't seen him on stage either since the Arnold.
Speaking of Cody, congratulations to Cody. I just saw the Facebook announcement this past week that Cody is expecting a baby. I believe a baby boy. So,
very good.
I think it's fair to say that Cody's contribution to the gene pool will be much appreciated by the general population. So,
well, if he's going to hit a show, he better do it quick, because his life's going to be a whole lot different in 8-9 months. I don't know how far along they are, but congratulations to Cody.
I'll talk to him this weekend and see if he's got plans on getting on stage this year. Or Cody's young and he knows that he's going to have to put on a little bit of size to be a competitor here, and it's real easy to forget that. I think Cody's only like 22 now.
He's got to be older than that. He's been 20. He's like 20, Dick Clark, man. He's been 22 for 5 years.
He's been 22 forever.
Come on.
No, because he just won the USA's in 2005, and he was 20.
He was like
2015,
21.
2016. No, he won the 2015 USA's. He won the 2015 USA's, and he was 20.
So he's at least 23.
No, he was like 20 or 21 at the USA's when he won it.
Wasn't that 2 years ago? Where's your math?
Oh, I thought you said he was 23.
No. He's got to be at least 23. Like I said,
he's still 20.
He's
whatever.
Probably older, but
if you look at Cody, let's say he's 22 or 23 right now. He's still 2 or 3 years behind. And we look at how young Dallas and Justin Compton are. He's still a couple years behind them. So Cody's got time. I know in talking to Cody and stuff, he wants to put his muscle on at a slower rate, make sure it's quality progress, quality gains. He's not looking to blow up and be 40 pounds heavier by next week. And I think that's a good approach for him. He's really young, and if he wants to have a long-term viable career, which I think he can, he wants to get started off in the right way, All
right, well, see if you can get some info out of Cody. We wish him the best, of course, with the new family coming, and that's going to wrap it up here on TLR, David. We will be back, of course, this next week. We will preview the Orlando Europa coming up just around the corner, and then it's off to the races. New York also coming up next week. So lots of stuff going to be cooking now in the world of bodybuilding. But that's going to wrap it up.
Let's come out Monday, guys. If you're wondering who's doing what shows, the competitor lists always come out Monday morning on the IFBB's website. So head over there. It'll show all the lists. They're usually pretty good at getting them up pretty early Monday morning. So we'll obviously be going over it. But if you're looking to see, if you're itching to see who's in the show, that's where you need to go.
All right. And for all the updates, of course, in the Olympia Qualification Series, guys, you can get that info at MrOlympia.com. And that's going to wrap things up here. David, we will see everybody right back here next week.